Religion, dogma, and error. I repeat, religion, dogma, and error. Swagatham, Vanakkam, welcome, good morning. In this video, we consider very briefly with an open mind a very obvious, glaring aspect of our religious life. And that glaring aspect arises out of a contrast, which nobody could have missed, but the vast majority of people who consider themselves to be religious inevitably miss it for the reasons that we may be able to analyze as we proceed. What is the contrast? Religion subsists on a set of doctrines and dogmas. There's no religion which is not dogmatic. A religion which is not dogmatic is a contradiction in terms. Even the most Catholic, eclectic, tolerant of religions is still dogmatic. Because you can't have a religion without strong beliefs, and strong beliefs always assume the form of dogmas. Dogmas are core religious insights or religious truths that are not open to any further discussion, examination, or modification. Dogmas are the given. If you are a believer, you are not supposed to subject the dogmas of your religion to any rational scrutiny or personal thinking. You have to endorse it, accept it, abide by it unthinkingly. That's a bottom line duty you owe as the member of a religious community. The moment you begin to think about the dogmas of a religion as its practitioner from a rational perspective, you begin to be targeted, and in a short while you will be excommunicated or excluded from the ambit of that community. So that's the nature of dogma. Dogma is a phenomenon which embodies absolute certainty and infallibility. Infallibility. Now let's think a little further. All dogmas are man-made. There's not a single dogma that's been revealed from heaven. Even in the case of religions that owe their origin to revelations, there's absolutely no claim that dogmas were revealed from heaven or revealed by God. Dogmas were created by human beings, quite obviously in response to the historical conditions that prevailed from time to time. And of course, dogmas were all created in the distant past, and therefore these conditions pertained to whatever was obtained a long time back in history. Now, the interesting thing is that if dogmas were created in order to meet the specific requirements or to obviate the pressures and challenges that a faith community or a religion faced at a point in history, which is long back in time, given that history doesn't stand still and life is a river that flows forward continuously, and therefore the situations in which believers find themselves continuously change, how can dogmas formulated, say, 1500, 1600, 1700 years ago, which were formulated in response to the specific conditions obtained at that point in time, which conditions were different from the time when the religion was born, how can the same dogmas continue to bind people who are living in circumstances radically different from the circumstances obtained at the time when dogmas were formulated and made completely closed to all forms of discussion? In other words, how can infallibility or insurance against ever being proved wrong or inadequate or irrelevant be claimed for dogmas which were the products of historical contingencies, and historical conditions keep changing, and to the extent that they change, the relevance of these dogmas also should be affected. But this very thought is considered anathema or rebellious or heretical, and we need to understand why. So, two things are very, very important, interesting, and they make a study in contrast. One is the attitude of absolute certainty or inerrancy. To be errant is to be prone to mistakes. To be inerrant is to be totally free from committing mistakes. For example, papal infallibility, papal inerrancy. So, when it comes to religious beliefs which are formulated at a certain point in history, infallibility, inerrancy, absolute certainty is claimed. At the same time, for all other purposes, we are continuously told that human beings are always likely to err. To err is human. And in the Christian context, believers are continuously told that they are sinners, and to the extent that they are sinners, they are imperfect. And to the extent that they are imperfect, they are always likely to commit mistakes, and therefore they should be humble, they should be open to correction, they should be open to advice and guidance from whoever happens to hold religious authority. So, this kind of contradiction, on the one hand, everything is completely insured against error. On the other hand, when it comes to the life of individuals, they're always prone to error. Now, this is a contradiction that we need to really understand. So, the problem with complete surrender to dogmas is that the religious experience gets cut off from the lived life of the people, and they're somehow required to relate to something that happened a long time ago without ever being able to connect it to their own life at the present time. And at the same time, they're also made to believe that they are worshipping a living God, and that living God not only operated in the past but also is alive, active, and is a keen participant in their own life. God cares for them, and as Jesus said, not a hair from your head will fall without your Father in heaven knowing it. So God is very alert, alive, and active today. At the same time, this God who is alive and active, who is a keen participant in the life of individuals, must be known only through the dogmas that were formulated 1700, 1800 years ago. Again, this is something that believers gloss over. They don't pay any attention to this. Now, the problem with cultivating a dogmatic attitude is that we become intolerant of emergent truths, emergent insights, emergent experiences. And to the extent that we are dogmatic in religion, we live in denial of many of the challenging, disturbing aspects of our life today. Because the price that a person has to live in order to be religious is total surrender to dogmas. And dogmas are inerrant, they cannot be wrong. So, if you have an experience which doesn't seem to harmonize with the dictates of dogmas, then what do? You're required to live in denial of your own experience. Now, obviously, this doesn't do any good to the believer, the individual person who is required to do so. Now, there is a further problem to this, and that is Dogmas serve as a stone wall against the believer and the rest of the world. Now, to the extent that dogmas were formulated and made inflexible and a closed category, say hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and the world around has changed very radically and very swiftly all around us. In order to hold on to these dogmas, you have to deny the world around you. Because the world around you is changing, dogmas never change, dogmas are not supposed to change. So you are caught between dogmas which are crystallized, settled, hardened, petrified, dogmas that are not open to change on the one hand. And you are required to live in a world which is changing continuously. In fact, the rate of change is accelerating. Today, as Alvin Toffler very eloquently argued in his well-researched book, Future Shock, the rate of change is escalating, is intensifying. What would have taken, say, 200 years to consolidate a piece of change, say 1,000 years ago, now takes only 200 days or maybe even 20 days. So that's the pace at which change is happening. So on the one hand, you're required to live in complete subjection to or total allegiance to a set of dogmas that cannot change. And on the other hand, you're required to live in a world which is changing by the minute. How can you resolve this tension? There's only one way, and that is deny the world, live in denial of the world. But the problem is your total life, your practical life, is located entirely in this world which you are required to deny. So you can never deny the world unless you commit suicide. So what happens? What's the outcome of this? The outcome of this is only hypocrisy. And what is the substance of that hypocrisy? You affirm, you claim, you state with your mouth that you are separated from the world, you have nothing to do with the world, and you live only according to the dictates of dogmas that were formulated a long, long time ago, which have actually lost their connectivity to human life. And yet all your life is lived in the world that you deny. And this is an arrangement that is very fertile for the mushrooming of hypocrisy. This is the reason why a very realistic thinker, sometimes called a pessimistic thinker, like what's his name? Oh, I forget his name. Anyway, I'll come to that. He says that religion and hypocrisy are inseparable. Religion, Arthur Schopenhauer. His work that I have in mind, the specific reference is to a book titled Religion, a Dialogue. Religion, a Dialogue by Arthur Schopenhauer, where he says that religion and hypocrisy are inseparable. Are you in religion? Do you practice a religion? Then hypocrisy is inevitable. Now, it was not Arthur Schopenhauer who discovered this or realized this first. As far as I can understand, the person who realized it first and very powerfully and clearly was Jesus of Nazareth. And I'm pretty sure that Arthur Schopenhauer got this insight from Jesus of Nazareth, though Arthur Schopenhauer, unfortunately, in that particular book, does not acknowledge his real source. I can connect one to the other, and I can take it straight to the teachings of Jesus Christ. It was, I'm sure, it's because of this that two things in the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. First, he presented or introduced himself as the truth. John chapter 14, verse 6, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So he's the truth. Now, because he's the truth, and he says, because truth sets you free, Jesus also tried to liberate people from their slavery or their bondage to religion. Christians are shocked when I say that the fundamental mission of Jesus Christ was not to make people more religious, but to liberate them from their bondage in religion, their religious bondage. And why is that necessary? Unless and until people are set free from their state of slavery or their bondage in religion, they will not be able to connect to God, because organized religion serves as a stone wall of separation between God and human beings. Let's take one example. Every organized religion has its own designated place of worship. Now, the greatest lie on which places of worship are founded, whether it is church, mosque, temple, gurudwara, it makes no difference. The most glaring, lurid lie on which places of worship are founded or places of worship are compacted or built is the lie that God stays confined there. At the same time, from within that building, which is erected on the foundation of the lie that God is found only there, is proclaimed the idea that God is omnipresent. So God is omnipresent inside a building which is man-made, which is such a small place. Now, can you think of anything more ridiculous than this? So, the kind of piety, the kind of godliness or God awareness that people experience in these enclosed places, churches, mosques, temples, etc., they don't experience outside of it. Why? Because from birth onwards, they are brainwashed to believe that God's presence is confined to places of worship. They can't worship God anywhere else. Why? Because priestly authority is secure only within the four walls that they themselves create. And therefore, it suits their interest to spread the canard and get people to believe the canard that God stays confined within the space over which the priestly class exercises domination, control. So, this idea of separation from the rest of the world must be connected to the idea that religion is a sum total of dogmas, which may be true. But my submission is, your spiritual life can never be dogmatized. You cannot contain your religious freedom within the small elbow room of a number of dogmas or any number of dogmas, because dogmas are dead categories. They were formulated a long time ago, and to the extent that they are immune to and they cannot be subject to the logic of the lived life of continuous seeking and reappropriation of truth through personal experience, which is a birthright of every human being to seek and find, as Jesus said. Dogmas can only cut people off from the world of lived realities, which comprises human life. So it's impossible to connect dogmas to the dynamics of life. So this has a tendency to sever people, to cut people, to exclude people from the domain of life itself. This was the reason why Jesus found that people remaining in bondage to religion was a terrible problem, and that as long as they languished in this state, they would never come closer to God. And the hope of humanity lay in finding their point of meeting with God and harmony between their will and God's will, so that they are liberated from the limiting conditions of this world and enabled to discover themselves in truth and beauty. Now, I'll say something more on this and I shall close. Now, everyone knows, everyone who has studied the dynamics, the individual society dynamics, that by virtue of living in a period of time, in a culture, in a society, Individuals have to conform to the norms, the assumptions, the opinions, the standards and expectations prevailing in that society. At the same time, every individual is unique. There is a good reason why individuals are unique. Individual uniqueness is connected to the inexhaustible abundance of life. Life is a phenomenon that far transcends the sum total of all that has yet been revealed. Life is inexhaustible, life is infinite, and therefore it has a need to continuously express itself, its various aspects. And you know quite well, all of us know quite well, that what remains to be expressed cannot be expressed through individuals who have already come, and therefore individuals who conform to a certain types. What remains to be expressed of the inexhaustible freshness and uniqueness of life can be expressed only through individuals who are unique. If individuals are made to conform to certain existing norms and conditions of the society, they have to live in denial of their own uniqueness, and their uniqueness contains the responsibility of having to reveal the as yet unmanifested aspects of life. And it is in this respect that living in a society, in a culture, in a country, belonging to a system or structure created by man, a structure which is always constructed on the common denominator of humanity, which excludes individual uniqueness, prevents individuals from attaining fulfillment and satisfaction, because we can actually realize our fulfillment, our personal dignity, and attain a sense of satisfaction, a sense of fullness of life, if you like, only we express ourselves fully in terms of that which is unique to us as individuals, so that we serve the larger purpose of being expressions of a small aspect of the infinitesimal variety, diversity, plenitude, and possibilities of life itself. Life is a capital L. Life is forever expressing itself, and the fullness of life has not been revealed as yet. And all of human search is actually, knowingly or unknowingly, even search within the domain of science, even if scientists are not aware of it, we're all involved in this process of life continuously yearning to express itself in the fullness of it. It can happen only over a long, perhaps an unending period of time. So it is for this reason that all of us are created as individual people, individuals with uniqueness. As unique aspect of the reality of life, the truth of life has to find expression through us. It is this possibility that is completely ruined when we are required to live in conformity to set practices, because that conformity alienates us totally from our personal uniqueness. It is for this reason that those who live in abject slavish conformity to the status quo live in a state of perpetual resentment and unhappiness, without either being able to understand the reason for it or being able to shake out of these shackles of conformity. Now, dogmas are the most powerful means of enforcing conformity. Dogmas shut out the possibility to think, to seek, and to find. And dogmas, as I said, alienate us from the world around us of living realities. So we actually live like corpses. The dogmatic live like corpses. It's impossible to converse rationally with a person, converse truthfully with a person who is totally dogmatic. It's as if you're talking to somebody who lived a long time ago, whose apparition is still visible. Therefore, you can share some words and sentences without being ever able to connect heart to heart in a meaningful conversation. So, the problem now, in the light of all this, we can now reformulate the problem. The core problem in religion is this problem of hypocrisy. And that problem of hypocrisy has its roots deep in the dogmatic character of religion, And the dogmatic character of religion arises from the pragmatism of religion, which renounces the idealism of religion. And every religion, all the same, had its origin in spiritual idealism as a protest against the aberrations of the status quo, which prevented individuals from attaining fulfillment and the greatness, the dignity of being human. And on the other hand, every individual is supposed to be fallible, error prone. Dogmas maintain that they are completely insured against error. Individuals are always error prone. Now, these individuals who are always error prone are made to be dependent on dogmas which are never likely to be touched by any error, though they were formulated a long time ago by very people who are error prone. As I said, all dogmas are man-made. Man is error prone, and therefore dogmas also must be error prone. If you use syllogism, the syllogistic mode of logic in thinking, uh, uh, man is error prone. All dogmas are made by a man, therefore dogmas must also be error prone. On the other hand, if dogmas were created by individuals who are completely infallible, then the creators are infallible, the dogmas also will be infallible. But that's never the case. Now, if dogmas are infallible, then surely we should have absolutely no problem in opening up dogmas to rational thinking. We don't have to be defensive, we don't have to be intolerant, we don't have to be nervous. But somebody wants to think, at least on the basis of his experience or his needs or his state of bewilderment, in order to resolve it, a revisiting of these dogmas. If dogmas are completely error prone and they are eternal truths, then we should be far more tolerant of, more confident of, and less defensive about anyone wanting to examine dogmas from a perspective of his need to be deeper in understanding as well as a state of enlightenment. So, the dogmatic attitude does not help the individual because, I state two reasons and I close. If a dogma is proved to be wrong in the inevitable flow of history, circumstances having changed, then it is certainly to the advantage of the believer and the community to which he belongs, the religious community to which he belongs, to recognize that this particular dogma is an error, and he and the community can disown it and they will be the better of it, because no community is served by remaining in subjection to falsehoods encapsulated as dogmas. Number one. That's the first gain. The second gain in opening up dogmas to rational contestation or rational scrutiny is, suppose the dogmas are 100% true, which is very likely the case. I don't want to prejudge an issue. Let's assume that all these dogmas are true. Still opening them up for discussion is beneficial because when a person who questions the dogma puts forward his argument against the dogma, the defenders of the dogma who are thoroughly persuaded of the truth of dogma will confront them in a state of discussion, dialogue, debate, etc., which deepens the understanding of the dogma. If you put your dogmas in a cold storage cell, completely protected from any contemporary examination, you yourself are disconnecting from that dogma. You're disconnecting others from the dogma. So there is no engagement with the dogma. To the extent that there is no engagement with the dogma, there is no deepening understanding of it. And if there is no deepening understanding of it, there is no personal connectivity to it. It's as good as not having the dogma. So what has happened is the dogmatic attitude about the dogma. Two things: dogma, then the dogmatic attitude which protects these dogmas within a stone embankment. completely isolated from any contemporary existential experiential re-examination. They actually cut off the dogmas not only from the questions raised by unbelievers, even more dangerously and even more lamentably, they isolate these dogmas from the life of the believers themselves, and yet their belief is supposed to be compacted of these very dogmas. And therefore, the dogmatic attitude drives a wedge between the faith of a particular religion and the believers of that religion. It's a complete mess, total mess. The real heart of a particular religious tradition, which is supposed to be compacted of these dogmas according to the official stand taken by the priestly class. You ask them, what is religion? What is Christianity, for example? These dogmas. These dogmas are settled, well defined, time tested articles of belief. So, if you want to know Christianity, please pay attention to and master these dogmas, then you're Christian, right? And yet, these dogmas are kept hermetically sealed off from the life of the believer, because the moment a dogma comes into contact with the life of a person, any human being, he cannot but ask questions, because he needs to understand the dogma. How do you relate to a dogma that you don't understand? How do you understand a dogma unless you relate it to your experience? And if you relate a dogma to or anything to your experience, your mind is continuously asking questions about it. It cannot be otherwise, because that's how we are made. So if you look at this phenomenon from any which way, you find that this is an absolutely ridiculous arrangement. And therefore, I can very well understand by Arthur Schopenhauer in the book that I referred to, namely Religion and Dialogue, says that religion and hypocrisy are inseparable. And as I said, and I repeat, he derived this insight entirely from Jesus of Nazareth, though Christians will be shocked when I say this. This is the absolute truth. I don't have the slightest doubt about it. Jesus was the least dogmatic person you can ever imagine in the sphere of religion. He questioned every dogma, every custom, every tradition, every practice, and every item of alienation from the rest of the world, in particular, the great stone wall that separated the Jews from the Samaritans, the saints from sinners, the priests from prostitutes. Can you imagine a greater revolutionary than that? There is nothing that Jesus left unquestioned, untested. And therefore, on the strength of his personal experience, he states authentically and gives to us a very profound spiritual responsibility. He said, seek and find. Seek and find. And I say to you today, seek and find, even if you may have to pay with your life for it, for your eternal life depends on it. Seek and find.